How's it going, guys? In this video, I'm going to show you how to install Zippy extension spacers in the Atropos SPY. So to start, you're going to need a T8 security Torx bit because Atropos uses T8 security Torx screws. So I'm going to start just by unscrewing the spacer screws. You can see I've already got one of the extension spacers installed, so we're going to do the second one together. And we're just going to start by unscrewing the spacer screws. If you can see mine came out pretty easily. If you get a spinning pivot and you're unable to get one out, my recommendation is pop the one you can get out and then rotate. You can try two ways. You can rotate the spacer and apply pressure with your thumb to create friction on the sex bolt and then unscrew it. Or you can try the technique where you push the two handle slabs in opposite directions relative to each other. So I'd push the bottom one this way and the top one that way, just like that, and then unscrew. Both methods work on the same principle, which is applying force and friction onto the sex bolt so it stops spinning. But mine came out easily, so I'm not going to suffer through that. Pop those out, no problem. Atropos hardware can be pretty bad, so I'm going to real quick just try and fully tighten the screw in. If you have screws that are not fully tightened, it can make tuning or really installing the spacers a little more challenging than it needs to be. That's about as far as it wants to go in, so we'll leave it there. All right, now take your Zippy spacer and we're going to install it. Again, orient the long side of the spacer away from the blade, and we're just going to pop it in, and then we're going to take one of the sex bolts, pop it in. It should not go in all the way at this point, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to rest it against the table, and I'm going to push the spacer in and the handles down until the sex bolt goes in all the way. It might require a little bit of wiggling of the top scale, but you can see now my sex bolt's in all the way. I'm going to repeat that on the second sex bolt. Too easy. All right, now what I'm going to do is start screwing the sex bolts in. I'm not going to screw these in hard right now, just very lightly. I'm going to put the uppermost screw in, which I've done already, very lightly, and then the bottommost screw I'm going to do until I feel a medium resistance, and it doesn't really want to screw in without a lot of force. And I haven't tightened down this screw, but what I'm going to do is use the stock spacer as a guide. I'm going to pop it in just below the Zippy spacer, and I'm going to screw the uppermost sex bolt in. This one's spinning on that side. That's the sex bolt side, so let me swap hands. And I'm just going to screw this small amounts until the handles catch on the stock spacer and it becomes slightly difficult to remove. So it's almost there. So I can feel the handles catching on the spacer, and I'm going to pull it out. There was some resistance, some friction. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to examine the handle slabs and ensure they're parallel. So I know that this bottommost screw is tightened the correct amount because it caught on the spacer. The topmost screw, however, might need to be slightly tightened or slightly loosened. At this point, I'll examine the handle slabs and make sure they're parallel. If you see inward bowing, so that the handle slabs are like pinched closer together, it means you need to tighten the outermost screw. And if you see outward bowing, where the handles appear to be moving away from each other in the middle, you would need to loosen the outermost screw. Mine miraculously look pretty parallel just on my first try, so I'm not going to mess with it. If you have calipers, what I recommend doing is first make sure your pivots are fully tightened down and your Zen pins are tightened down. They don't need to be super cranked or anything, but I'm going to use calipers to just measure the channel width at the pivots and then do the same thing here. So you can see my handles are not parallel right now. So I actually do need to tighten the spacers. So I'll just do maybe 1/8 of a turn on each one and then remeasure. And you can just repeat that procedure until they're parallel. Keep in mind though, if you take the calipers on the stock spacer, 5.15, so the stock configuration had the slabs non-parallel. So it kind of just depends on how good your tune is. For an Atropos, which are known to have really poor tunes, lots of tap, it doesn't really matter so much. On something where you have like really nicely tuned bushings, like zero play, how parallel the handle slabs are is going to matter down to, the 10th, 100th of a millimeter. On a Balisong like this, where the tune is already really bad, it doesn't matter. So it's up to your own judgment on whether you want to chase, better than stock tolerances on the Atropos. I'm going to leave it here because the stock spacers are thicker and it has a lot of tap and play anyway, so there's really no benefit to trying to get things perfect since they'll never be perfect. But those are the assembly instructions on the Atropos Spy. You now have handle extensions and jimping and much lighter spacers, which offer a more neutral balance. So that's the video, guys. Thanks.